Thank you very, very much for that. There's some breaking news we're following right now. The FBI has executed a search warrant today at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort down in Palm Beach, Florida. The former president confirms all of this to CNN. We'll stay on top of this story. Much more coming up on Aaron Burnett Out Front. And to our viewers, thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. Aaron Burnett Out Front starts right now.
Out front next, breaking news. CNN learning the FBI executed a search warrant at Trump's Mar-a-Lago in Florida. We have the details just coming in as I speak. And more trouble tonight for one of Trump's biggest allies. The January 6th committee now has Alex Jones' texts. And given what the conspiracy theorists said in the days leading up to and on January 6th, those texts could reveal a lot. And an urgent manhunt underway tonight after a series of deadly shootings. Now police are calling on the public to help track down a vehicle. Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Aaron Burnett. Out front tonight on this Monday, breaking news. We are learning that the FBI executed a search warrant at former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. Obviously, a very significant headline there. We're going to be getting much more information over the coming minutes. Literally, we have just found this out. As we get more, we're going to bring it to you. Obviously, an FBI and a search warrant coming as part of the DOJ, and it comes on the same day that the January 6th Select Committee is now in possession of new text messages, messages that we understand belong to conspiracy theorist and Trump supporter Alex Jones. The committee requesting the messages after discovering Jones' attorney accidentally sent 2 years worth of text messages to the attorney representing 2 parents of Sandy Hook victims. And the texts in that case were damning.
That is how I know you lied to me when you said you didn't have text messages about Sandy Hook. Did you know that?
Text messages related to January 6th could also be very damaging to Jones, as those were, because Jones was a core and huge promoter of Trump's election lies leading up to January 6th. Here is just some of what he said before January 6th.
It's Saturday, December 19th. The year is 2020. And one of the most historic events in American history has just taken place. President Trump, in the early morning hours today, tweeted that he wants the American people to march on Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers. The time for games is over. The time for action is now. Where were you when history called? Where were you when you and your children's destiny and future was on the line?
Trump's former spokesperson, Katrina Pearson, who helped organize the rally on January 6th, she even warned Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, about what she was hearing from Alex Jones.
I think I even texted him some of my concerns, but I did briefly go over some of the concerns that I had raised to everybody with Alex Jones or Ollie Alexander and some of the rhetoric that they were doing.
And Jones' words and actions on the night before January 6th to Trump supporters in Washington, D.C. were extremely direct.
I don't know how this is going to end, but if they want to fight, they better believe they've got one.
That was the eve of January 6th. Hours later, on Insurrection Day, Jones was on U.S. Capitol grounds.
Trump is going to speak over here. Trump is coming on the other side.
Jones was there. Jones mattered. But he has never testified to exactly what he knows. Because when he met with the January 6th Select Committee earlier this year, he was anything but cooperative.
I just had a very intense experience being interrogated by the January 6th committee lawyers. They were polite, but they were dogged. But I said this, my lawyer told me almost 100 times today during the interrogation. On advice of counsel, I am asserting my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Almost 100 times asserting his Fifth Amendment rights. That's what he says. Well, we sure know how the former President Trump feels about people who plead the Fifth.
The mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
Well, That's what he believes. Jessica Schneider is out front live in Washington. And Jessica, obviously the context here, we have this breaking news that a search warrant by the FBI has been executed on Mar-a-Lago. We're waiting for more details on that very significant headline. And it comes on the day of these texts, Alex Jones' texts, also a core person on January 6th. What more are you learning about the importance of these texts to the January 6th committee?
Well, Aaron, everything seems to be ramping up here on these parallel tracks. The committee, the Department of Justice investigation. But as for the committee here, they want to know a lot more about Jones's role on January 6th and how it plays in. And these texts, they may at least shed a bit more light. So, we know that Alex Jones was the central player on January 6th. We saw him there on the restricted U.S. Capitol grounds. He riled up the protesters. He never actually entered the Capitol, and he even insisted he never helped plan any of the violence. But the committee believes that there is a lot more to find out about Jones and any connections he might have to Trump allies. What we know at this point, the committee has received 2 years worth of text messages. His attorney, in this crazy backstory, he inadvertently sent these messages to the plaintiffs in that defamation case involving Sandy Hook that we saw play out last week. And it's possible that some of those might be relevant to the committee's investigation, especially since we've reported that Jones actually communicated with Roger Stone at some point. Aaron, the only snag right now is that we don't know what 2 years these text messages actually cover, if any of them are from around the time period, around the 2020 election or January 6th. But we heard it there. Alex Jones has gone before the committee before. He testified earlier this year, said, though, that he repeatedly asserted his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So the committee has been wanting more information from Jones, maybe getting it with these texts. We'll wait and see. This is information Jones wasn't willing to previously give up that is now in the committee's hands. Aaron?
All right. Thank you very much, Jessica Schneider. I want to go now to our senior legal analyst, a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, along with Stephanie Grisham, former Trump White House press secretary. She resigned on January 6th. Okay, I want to ask each of you about, obviously, this news from the January 6th committee. I want to start with the headline we have, though, the breaking news that the FBI has executed a search warrant on Mar-a-Lago. We don't yet have more details on that, Ellie, at this point, but we do have that information. We know that obviously this is the FBI, so that's the Department of Justice. What can you glean from that headline such that it is right now?
Well, Aaron, it's an enormous step by the FBI and by DOJ. Here's what we know for sure. In order to get a search warrant in the federal system, prosecutors have to establish probable cause that a crime was committed. I've done this many times. You have to write it out in an affidavit in detail. Then you have to bring it over to a judge. The judge has to agree, yes, I find that there's probable cause that a crime was committed. Now, that's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but that's still a significant evidentiary showing. You also have to show the judge that you're likely to find evidence in the place to be searched, and that evidence has been there, or you would expect it to have been there fairly recently in time. So that's what we know for sure. I think it's also very safe to say that given DOJ's written policies in the Justice Manual, this would have had to have been approved by the highest levels up to and including the Attorney General himself. So this is a major step. That's what we know for sure.
All right, a major step. That's what we know for sure. Now, Stephanie, we also know that it had turned out earlier, right, that the president had taken a lot of documents that were marked as top secret classified to Mar-a-Lago that he shouldn't have. I don't want to directly connect those two things because I don't know that they're connected. I'm just giving everyone the context that we know that happened in the past. You spent a lot of time there. You know what the president did, and a lot of these documents that he wanted to keep or he wanted his hands on. What context can you add?
I've got to just agree that this is enormous. I'm still wrapping my head around it because, as you said at the top of the show, this is breaking news. I think that, knowing Mar-a-Lago like I do, I would imagine his office and his bedroom office were two of the areas searched. I don't know if your viewers have yet seen the statement put out by the former president, but he is already, of course, blaming the FBI, calling this political, calling it a witch hunt. So that says to me he's very, very nervous and very upset. So it's going to be really interesting. I think things are finally ramping up, and I hope and I wonder if people in the Republican Party will finally start to see things for how they are and do what's right for the country over the party.
All right, both of you, please stay with me. Caitlin Collins is with us now with some more on this reporting. And Caitlin, obviously a very significant headline that you are breaking. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, this is incredibly significant. And of course, we should note that when the former president confirmed that, yes, this raid did happen on his Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, he did not specify why exactly this raid happened. So we are still trying to confirm that. Of course, I know you mentioned the missing documents from the National Archives and the concerns about that. So that remains to be seen. I will note that in this statement where the former president confirmed to me that, yes, FBI agents did conduct a raid at Mar-a-Lago today, he said it was a large number of FBI, a large group of FBI agents. He says that he believes this is a politically motivated event that happened, this search of Mar-a-Lago. Of course, we're waiting to hear from authorities why they conducted this search, how they got this search warrant, and of course, what the reason is behind it. I will note, he does give one detail in here that is notable. He says, quote, Aaron, I'm going to read this now. Such an assault could only take place in broken third world countries. Sadly, America has now become one of those countries. He says, quote, they even broke into my safe. Now, Aaron, he does not say what they were looking for, what they wanted to get, if they took anything from that safe, but it is notable that he says they did even break into his safe. In this statement, I should note, when he does not say what the reason is for this raid, he does reference Hillary Clinton's emails. Of course, that has long been an obsession of the former president's. He said nothing happened to her to hold her accountable, talking about what she took from the White House. So that could be an indication that this is related to the National Archives. But again, we are still waiting to find out more, though Trump has confirmed to me that, yes, this raid was conducted on Mar-a-Lago today.
All right, Caitlin Collins, thank you very much. And of course, obviously very significant reporting here. Caitlin breaking this. Ellie, let me give you a chance to respond to a couple of the things that she just mentioned from the former president's statement. One, that they even broke into his safe, and two, that he references a large number of FBI agents. What do you read into that?
Sure. So taking the second one first, typically when someone's executing a search warrant, you do send many, many agents out, especially in a large property like Mar-a-Lago. Wouldn't surprise me if there was a dozen or more FBI agents. That's fairly standard operating procedure. And the higher level sensitivity, of course, the more personnel you want there. It is a really interesting detail, as Caitlin noted, that the former president says that his safe was broken into. What you have to do in a search warrant affidavit is describe for the judge with some particularity, here's the kind of evidence we're searching for. And typically, in a case like this, you might include laptops, phone, thumb drives, electronic devices. And then typically you have the authority to go into and to search and to enter any area that could house those items. So a safe certainly could house any of those items. That's fairly typical in this kind of search warrant, but you do have to specify, as I said before, you have to specify a crime. You have to establish that you have proof, probable cause proof of that crime being committed, and that you're likely to find evidence of that crime in the area that you're searching.
Okay, so Ellie, I do want to just, sort of to put the pause for a moment, put the emphasis here on something very basic but very crucial. They would have had to establish probable cause that a crime was committed and that they needed to search for more information on that. Again, they would have had to have already established probable cause of a crime, in this case related to the former president of the United States. Yes. I just want to put the exclamation point on that.
Yeah, and Aaron, let me explain sort of how that works. A prosecutor has to sit down and write out an affidavit with an FBI agent. You can't just say, hey, judge, we have probable cause, take our word for it. There actually are contexts where you can do that. But in a search warrant, you have to say, and here's what our probable cause is. We have the following evidence. You have to write it all out. Then there's a check on that. It's not just up to prosecutors. It's not just up to the FBI. You have to take it to a federal judge who then reviews it and has to agree. And I've done this many times. Occasionally, a judge will say, I don't think you have enough evidence, or add a little more and come back, or I'm not signing this. Most of the time, federal judges do sign it, but you can bet that a judge read every word of this and agreed, again, that there's probable cause that's significantly less than proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's a significant showing. It's not something that DOJ does lightly, particularly when you're talking about the property of the former president.
So, Stephanie, I'd be remiss if I didn't add some context here about, big story everyone's talking about today, right? Those pictures that Maggie Haberman from the New York Times obtained of, the former president's handwriting on Sharpie, right? That he was shredding and ripping up documents, putting them in the toilet. Okay, he said he wasn't doing it, but he was. I raise this in the context of right now. Do you think that there's something that would have been so precious to him or so important in all of this that he knew was damning or a smoking gun that he wouldn't have destroyed when he has clearly shown a willingness to destroy documents that by law he should not be destroying?
The short answer is yes. I don't know how to explain that, though. It's just from my years of knowing him. It could be something he's particularly proud of. It could be something he was going to use later to possibly blackmail someone. These are me just guessing. I will say something that I find really interesting. You know, Mar-a-Lago is his home. And so it makes complete sense to me that that's where his most valuable items would be stored. And, you know, as you mentioned with Maggie's story today, with the pictures coming out, another thing that keeps hitting me is how are they knowing about this stuff? I know the circle around the president. I know the circle around the president at the White House and via now. And it's got to be somebody very close giving Maggie and giving the DOJ and the FBI and anyone else this kind of information of where to look. And I find that to be really interesting, and I hope that that plays out a little bit more.
Right, and absolutely. Again, the specifics as Caitlin shared, the safe. And Caitlin is back with us now. I mean, Caitlin, literally a moving and breaking story as we speak. What more have you just learned?
Yeah, and Aaron, I will note this raid happened today. This search warrant was executed at Mar-a-Lago today. I am told that the former president was not in Florida when this search was carried out by these FBI agents. He is actually at Trump Tower in New York. So that's not surprising given his schedule. He typically spends the summers in New York and New Jersey, and then in the winters, that is when he is at Mar-a-Lago. Of course, as Stephanie was noting, it has become his home since he left the White House. That is where he moved into the Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, Florida. So that is why this is so notable. And so, of course, we are still waiting to learn more on why this search warrant was executed, why it was carried out, and, of course, what these agents learned from this being carried out. But it is a remarkable moment to see that the former president is confirming that this raid has happened and that there were a large number of FBI agents, as he says, at Mar-a-Lago today. And, of course, as he said in his statement as well, he said they did access his safe. He did not say what he had kept in that safe, but it was a notable part of his very lengthy statement confirming this, Aaron.
Right. Obviously, one written with the motion that he would put that in there and put that out. So suddenly, Gloria Borger joins the conversation as well now. Gloria, what do you read into this? You know, we don't know exactly the reason. We don't know what probable crime was established to a level that a federal judge said to go ahead and execute this search warrant. But we do know that all those things were present. And here we are with a search warrant and a large number of FBI agents today raiding Mar-a-Lago.
I know it is kind of stunning. FBI agents raiding the home of a former president who was not there, by the way, as Caitlin was saying. And we also know, if you go back to April, we were reporting and others were reporting that the Justice Department began investigating the handling of these 15 boxes of White House records, including classified information that had been taken to Mar-a-Lago. I do not know whether this has anything to do with that or whether those documents that they got led them to decide, well, maybe there's more there than we received. I mean, I'm just speculating here, and let me make that clear. But I do think that it is an extraordinary step for them to do this. So there must be something they are looking for. And Ellie can talk about that more than I can, but it seems to me to get a judge to say you can do this on the home of a former president, it has to be pretty striking.
So, Ellie, let me ask here, because a lot of people watching this, and obviously as part of, we led the program, we were talking about the text messages that the January 6th committee had just obtained from Alex Jones, right? So when you talk about, in the context we're in, an FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, a lot of people are going to jump to the DOJ investigation into January 6th. But I want to be clear, Ellie, we don't know that these things are related or not, right? Mm-hmm. Could it be something specifically related, as Gloria is indicating, to those 15 boxes of classified documents that were not supposed to be removed from the National Archives, were supposed to be sent there, that went to Mar-a-Lago? Could it be as simple as the crime is removing those documents? Is it possible?
Yeah, it could be, Aaron. It could really be. any federal crime under the sun. When you fill out these affidavits that you bring to a federal judge to get a search warrant, you have to name a crime. You give the section number, and you have to say, here's our evidence. That could be information, as Stephanie was alluding to, as possibility from a source, from an informant. It could be information that you got from text. It could be any kind of information at all. But you do have to say what specific crime you are investigating. Now, those papers typically don't come out until much later in the process. If they do come out, the first thing I would look for is, well, what crime did they say? That will give us a big indication.
Right.
But yes, unauthorized destruction of classified materials is a federal crime. There are several potential federal crimes relating to January 6th. So it really could be any federal crime. But one other point, Aaron, that I think is important to understand. People may be wondering, well, when do you execute a search warrant as opposed to send someone a subpoena, right? And the answer as a federal prosecutor is if you don't believe that the person's going to faithfully comply with the subpoena, if you don't trust the person to fully turn over the documents, or if you believe there's some danger. I don't think there's a danger concern here. But a search warrant tells me that DOJ and the FBI did not have faith that Donald Trump or whoever the subject of this search warrant would be down at Mar-a-Lago would simply say, sure, thanks for the subpoena, here's all the documents requested, that they were able to establish that they had some concern that they might not be given all the evidence that they're entitled to.
And it had to be a pretty...
And again, go ahead, Gloria.
It had to be a pretty intensive search, judging from the former president's statement. And, that it seemed to last much of the day. So the question is, and again, we don't know the answer. He says they went into his safe. Since he's not at Mar-a-Lago, somebody had to report that to him. And did they do it specifically because they knew he wasn't at Mar-a-Lago? And if it was this intensive, and it seems to me that maybe it was broad. It's just very hard to know. So all we can do is speculate here.
Right. So let me ask you, Stephanie, and I want to get Ellie to weigh in on this as well. But as we try to understand, obviously this is hugely significant, whatever it is related to, whether it be related to January 6th, whether it related to documents that were wrongly removed from Washington or something else. But then in that, Stephanie, what stands out is the safe, which the former president himself is the one who told us about, right? He's saying someone broke into his safe. So that would imply they're not just checking for a bunch of boxes. So can you, Stephanie, help us understand a little bit more why something like that would have stood out to him, or why a safe in particular would have been a place where he kept things?
So again, this is going to be me just speculating and going off of my years of time with him. I will tell you, though, the fact that he mentioned the safe in the statement stood out to me immediately, because he likes to get ahead of things. That's something he used to tell me all the time. You just get ahead of it and then it'll be okay. I think that there's something in there that he didn't want anybody to see. Now, it could be anything. It could be stuff he doesn't want his wife to see. It could be anything. Again, we're speculating, as the whole panel has talked about. But the fact that they made their way to the safe, I don't know if it's the office safe, I don't know if it's their apartment safe, but the fact that he mentioned it, it really, really, it struck me, and I think that he's nervous.
So, Ellie, what do you make of that? Because, again, one of the things you first mentioned, and, I remember this, right, when Michael Cohen had his FBI, they showed up at his door, right? They want the electronic devices. They want the computers. They want the cell phones. Okay, that's fine. One thing we know about the former president, right, is that he's not somebody who's putting things in email and on a computer and a laptop, right? That's not where you're going to find some treasure trove in his particular case. So, Ellie, it's not as if there's, well, I mean, who knows, right? But some secret cell phone hidden in the safe. While it could be, what stands out to you about the word safe and why he is, as Stephanie said, clearly trying to get ahead of that specifically?
Well, Aaron, it is very common for search warrants to seek access to documents or records, whether they're paper documents or electronic documents. And the rule basically is, for the most part, when you execute a search warrant, you have the right to go into any area where those items could be stored. If we're talking about paper documents, or even if there was a cell phone or a laptop, that would certainly be something that you could find in a safe. Just to make a contrary example, sometimes, for example, if you have a stolen car case, you'll say, we're looking for this stolen car in a garage. You can't go look in a safe because there's not going to be a stolen car in a safe. However, if you're looking for documents, again, whether they're printed paper documents or electronics or cell phones, then you can look in a safe. It's quite common in cases when you are looking for documents that you get access into locked closets, safes, that kind of thing. So that's fairly common. Again, we don't know the specifics here, but it is often the case that FBI agents are looking for documents. The other thing that I think is important is you don't have to necessarily limit yourself to items that belong to a specific person. So the FBI didn't necessarily have to say to the judge, we only want to grab Donald Trump's items. They will say, we want any documents, any hard drives, etc. And it doesn't really matter who they belong to specifically. Usually a search warrant will be broad enough to allow FBI, DOJ to seize those type of items too.
All right, one thing Ellie mentioned was that it could take a long time to know what the probable probable cause for a crime that was proven to a judge in order to get this search warrant would have been. Caitlin Collins, I know you've been trying to reach out to the Department of Justice to get more information about what caused this, what prompted it. What are they telling you?
Yeah, they told my colleague Caitlin Polens they are not going to be commenting. So no comment from the Justice Department, no comment from the White House either. But Aaron, I will tell you what we do know as we await confirmation over what this search warrant was over is that there are 2 investigations related to Trump that are happening right now. One is the mishandling of classified information. That is the one that could potentially deal with documents that Trump, after he left office, took with him to Mar-a-Lago. And the other one is into the January 6th insurrection. That is what 2 things that we know are happening. We know some of his former aides have been interviewed regarding to that one. But when it comes to the documents, I will note that we did report earlier this year that investigators had issued a subpoena to the National Archives because they wanted access to more information about what exactly documents were taken to Mar-a-Lago, how they were handled while they were there, what they found, of course, when they requested the return of those documents. And so that is something that is helpful context, I think, when you're looking at this and you're wondering why this extraordinary raid was carried out at the former president's home in Florida. And I will say that at that time, when we noted about that subpoena to the National Archives, we were told by the former president's current staff that they maintained he had handled all documents properly. Clearly, there is some disagreement over that has prompted this investigation that is happening into how those documents were handled. And so that is remarkable in and of itself as we're waiting to see confirmation of this. Again, Trump was not actually at Mar-a-Lago when this raid was carried out. He's instead at Trump Tower in New York. He's often spending his summers in the Northeast. And I will note in his statement, Aaron, he's very critical of Democrats. He says Democrats desperately don't want him to run for president in 2024. He is indicating that he believes this is politically motivated. I will note, he says it was a large number of FBI agents that were at Mar-a-Lago today. He did pick the current FBI director, Chris Wray. It's a decision he said many times that he regrets, but it is an FBI director that was handpicked by Trump and put into that position.
All right, Gloria, I want to ask you about something else that you said stood out to you about the former president's statement, and that was that they spent a significant amount of time there today. What more from what he's saying in what you've described as a long statement, putting out, trying to get ahead of this? What more stands out to you?
Look, I think that, as Ellie was saying, they don't have to say we're specifically looking for this document that was potentially not handed over to the archives. They can be as broad as they want. And I think that's what probably happened today and got the former president so incensed to release this, this large statement. I mean, if this is about the handling of those 15 boxes of documents that went to Mar-a-Lago, the Justice Department started investigating it in April, and there was a subpoena that was part of the formal process to the archives to kind of get, by the FBI, to get a handle on what was in those documents, as Caitlin was saying. So maybe there was a discovery that there was something missing that needed to be there, or, they raised other questions about why wasn't this included in the box, or maybe there's more at Mar-a-Lago that we didn't get, that we should know about. So, I think, again, we don't know specifically what this raid was about, but it seems to me that when you connect it to Mar-a-Lago, what do we know about Mar-a-Lago? Well, there were these documents, including classified documents, that are potentially have been mishandled. And so it makes sense that the FBI would be looking at that.
Ellie, do you believe that we will find out what the crime was, for that they established probable cause from a judge, so we'll be able to understand whether this was related to the documents or January 6th or something else?
So the actual affidavit itself, Erin, that prosecutors fill out, that wouldn't come out formally through the court process for several months, way down the line. There are other documents that are attached to the affidavit that could come out. Some of them are sometimes given to the subject, so it could be up to the subject himself or herself. There's always leaks, there's always ways to find out. So it could be that we find out fairly quickly. But if we're talking about that actual affidavit coming out, the prosecutors filled out, the federal judge approved, that wouldn't happen through the normal court process for many, many months. And just to another point that Gloria made, it's not surprising really that this execution of a search warrant took quite a while. I mean, search warrants are invasive. They are intrusive. FBI agents typically go into a home or property with permission to look anywhere where they might find the listed pieces of property. So that can include going through closets, going through dressers, going under beds, into safes. It is an invasion of a person's right to privacy, which is why you have to go through these procedures and which is why you have to get a federal judge to sign off. Exactly. But it does take time. It is invasive. It is intrusive.
And just to underscore that point, Stephanie, so the former president wasn't there, but this is Mar-a-Lago, right? There's a lot of people who are there. There are a lot of people who saw a lot of things today and saw a lot of FBI agents running around. I mean, there are a lot of things we're going to start to hear.
Well, I've been thinking about that. That's true, and it's not. So it's not in season right now. So there are not guests there. It's closed down for the summertime, but there is staff there that runs it day to day for sure. And speaking about what Gloria said and previous people, Mar-a-Lago is very big. So it could be the office, the business office they would have had to look through, Donald Trump's office that he has, their home apartment, which includes her room, his room, a common room, an office. You've got their son who has an entire suite there. Her parents have an entire suite there. And then you've got all of the guest rooms. I don't know if they would go through those or not, but it's a large property. There are also family cottages where a lot of the family stays when they're in town. So I think that that's why they were there for so long, and it would make sense that there would be a lot of people there. I am curious to know if Secret Service how this would work with Secret Service. So that's something I'm really interested in.
And Aaron, our Kevin Liptak has just confirmed what I was saying earlier, and what Caitlin was saying earlier, is that the raid began early Monday morning, and the search was already underway at that point, and that it continued, I believe, throughout the day. And so, and that, in fact, and I'm going to read this to you now, this source said that law enforcement personnel appeared to be focused on the area of the club where Trump's offices and personal quarters are, which makes sense.
And so, so very, very focused there. All right, let's go back to Caitlin on that front. Caitlin, are you able to shed any more light on that? Of course, the interesting thing would be if the president had something that he didn't want people to know about, given his sophisticated experience with law enforcement. Who knows where I could have put it if it is a specific something.
Well, and that's what Kevin notes, is that what onlookers observed is that the law enforcement action that was underway at Mar-a-Lago appeared to be around his personal office, his personal quarters. Mar-a-Lago is obviously a massive place, and there is a certain part of the area that is just for the former president and his family. And so that is where it appeared to the action was happening today at Mar-a-Lago. As this raid went on for several hours, we are told. We are still learning more about what exactly that looked like and what time precisely that they arrived. I will note that as we are just finding out about this moments ago, when the former president did confirm it in a statement to CNN, that the White House, the Biden White House, is also now just finding out about this. They say White House officials were unaware that this was going to happen. They just found out when the rest of everyone else found out, when Trump confirmed it in a statement. They are referring all requests for comment or any questions to the White House to the Justice Department, and the Justice Department right now is not commenting. But I will note that as you look at this and you think about this, Aaron, and you talk about it, is remember it was just a few days ago that the Attorney General Merrick Garland was asked about the former president and whether or not he was considered above the law. or if he is someone who, if he had committed criminal actions, they thought if he is someone who would be pursued. And he said very clearly that no one was above the law. And when a reporter interjected to say even the former president, he repeated that sentiment. And so that has been the Justice Department coming under increasing pressure when it comes to the former president, and they've been very clear in that front. Of course, the Justice Department only goes so far in this, and we know that they had been the investigators had been interviewing former White House staffers, Trump White House staffers, about these records, about how they were handled, and of course, what exactly was taken to Mar-a-Lago, because as we reported at the time, it was over a dozen boxes, Aaron.
All right, so such crucial context. So Ellie, how does, from the point of where we are now, I'm thinking back to Michael Cohen or other situations, from the point where you are now in an investigation where you have executed a search warrant with probable cause for crime, what's the timeline from there to finding out what they got and whether there's going to be a charge?
Yeah, and so it will take DOJ and the FBI a substantial amount of time to go through what they got today, assuming that the search warrant was fairly broad. Whatever boxes of documents you grabbed, whatever electronic devices you may have grabbed, laptops, that kind of thing, it all has to be downloaded. It all has to be reviewed very carefully. That can take weeks or months. And I do want to make another point regarding timing here. DOJ has a long-standing policy that they will not announce politically sensitive indictments or take politically sensitive overt moves, such as executing a search warrant, within 60 or 90 days of an election, depending who you ask. Different people understand it differently. Today is just about 90 days out exactly from the midterms. I think maybe 91 or 92 days out from November 8th. So if they're going to abide by that policy, that may be a reason why they did it today, because they want to stay clear of that. If they're interpreting that as a 90-day rule, that could be a reason why they took the move today.
But Gloria, that puts incredible pressure on them, whether they're looking at it at 90 or 60, when you talk about the timeline Ellie's talking about.
Well, and that's why Jim Comey got in a lot of trouble with Hillary Clinton, if you'll recall. So I think it's quite, look, it's controversial no matter which way you look at it. They've just raided the home of a former president of the United States. Whether it's 60 days or 90 days, I'm sure they were aware of what Ellie is saying, very, very aware. And maybe they just made that deadline. But of course, this is huge news, and it's very clear to me that the president, the former president, is already spinning this in a way that he has been victimized by the Department of Justice and the Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. And this is something that he knew immediately that he needed to turn around and get on right away, so that he could say, look at what they did to me today. This is absurd.
All right, all stay with me. I want to go back to Caitlin. Caitlin, I understand that we're getting more information on the crucial thing here, which is what was this about?
Yeah, 3 sources have confirmed to CNN's Sarah Murray and Kristen Holmes that this search warrant that was executed on Mar-a-Lago today was in relation to that investigation into the handling of classified materials that were taken with the former president when he left the White House in January of 2021 to go to Mar-a-Lago. Of course, that is something we knew was under investigation, whether they were mishandled and what happened and why those boxes were taken there and what exactly was included. And now we have confirmed that is why this search warrant was executed on Mar-a-Lago, the Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach today. Again, reminding people, Trump was not there at the time. He has since confirmed the raid in a statement to CNN, saying that there were a large number of agents there, that they broke into his safe. And we should note that what this investigation is about and what we know so far is about 15 boxes, over a dozen boxes that have been taken to Mar-a-Lago. We were told generally that they contained documents, mementos, some gifts that were included in that. And obviously there is a Presidential Records Act. You are not allowed to take certain classified documents with you when you leave the White House. That is a property of the National Archives. And so there have been major questions about how that was handled. Now, Trump has maintained his innocence. His aides currently have said that he handled all of those documents properly. But there were big questions about what was taken there. And clearly, the fact that a raid was conducted and a search warrant was granted for the former president's property in Florida is very notable, and it does signify an escalation in this investigation. Where it ends up, we don't know, and it remains to be seen. And right now, the Justice Department, of course, is not commenting.
All right, so Ellie, now that we've confirmed this, and you heard Caitlin say, 3 sources. We've got multiple reporters here at CNN getting this information now. But what do you read into it? When this story first broke in the spring, a lot of the conversation was that what if he had removed things that he shouldn't remove, that could be a criminal act. But there was always sort of a but from a lot of lawyers that said, okay, the chances of them moving ahead on something like this wouldn't be high. And yet here we are. And they are moving ahead, right? And they have this search warrant. So what could go to that? What could cause that?
So this is crucial context from Caitlin that we just got right now. It is a federal crime to remove classified documents wrongly, intentionally. And so if you're filling out that affidavit and you have to list the crime, you can list that as the crime. I think it's also important to note that it appears to be limited to that and not to the broader January 6th investigation. But I also have to note, even if you get a search warrant based on probable cause of crime A, and then you find other evidence of crimes B, C, and D, you can still use that evidence to pursue crimes B, C, and D. So sometimes you find things that you're not expecting when you go in and do a search warrant on this. One other important fact that Caitlin reported, the fact that the White House did not know DOJ was doing this, I think is really important. First of all, just institutionally, DOJ absolutely should never be running these things by the White House for pre-approval. And second of all, we've already seen, and Donald Trump's immediate reaction was to claim it's political. That was predictable. And by maintaining that wall of separation, I think DOJ sort of protects its own independence and integrity here.
Gloria, this is where, though, the former president will try to seize upon his political motivations.
Sure.
Right?
And
You'll hear his next steps. Oh, I wanted to keep some gifts from President Xi, or whatever it may be that he will say, and try to minimize.
Of course. And the thing that's important to keep in mind here is that the National Archives was subpoenaed for the information that they got from Mar-a-Lago. So there is something in this ongoing investigation that the FBI is conducting that didn't seem right, right? I mean, if they felt that they had gotten the whole kit and caboodle, that they had gotten every document in those 15 boxes, this step probably wouldn't be necessary. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that once they looked at what they were handed by the archives, given what they know about January 6th or anything else, that they're saying, wait a minute, this is not a complete archive. And the President of the United States is required to hand over these documents when he leaves office. And if they believe that was not done by looking at what they got from the archives, the question is, what didn't they get?
Well, and Stephanie, again, back to what the former president himself has just told us, which is, in his anger and his ire, that they even went into his safe. This isn't as if there's just 15 boxes still stuck in a closet, right? The implication is that there are specific items which may have been pulled out or put somewhere. That's the implication that we're getting from the former president himself.
Absolutely. And as Ellie said, I can see that he's going to already say exactly, that these were mementos, or these were, love letters from Kim Jong-un, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But I want to say right now, the former president of the United States did not handle classified documents properly. I watched him do it. I sat in an airplane with him, watched him go through documents, throw some away, rip some up, and put some in his pocket, because I remember specifically thinking, I wonder why those go in his pocket. So I think this is going to be really interesting. And now that Caitlin, like Ellie said, now that Caitlin gave us that context, I think that something big is there. I don't think it's going to be just letters. I think it could be about military operations. This is me speculating. I want to be clear, but I could see the former president thinking those were cool or fun. And we were not a White House that followed the rules. And I will tell you that handling classified information was not something that was really pressed upon us on a daily basis, or weekly, or monthly.
All right, all of you, thank you so very much. I appreciate it as we continue to follow this breaking news of an FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. We're going to bring you more details as we get them this hour. All of this as China is upping the ante tonight, announcing a new round of military drills around Taiwan. Tonight, President Biden is voicing concern. Could that situation spiral out of control? And the woman who burst onto the Hollywood scene in Greece went on to sell 100 million albums. Singer and actress Olivia Newton-John has passed away. Lavendera, thank you very much. And thanks so much to all of you for joining us this hour. AC 360 starts right now.
Even as the details are preliminary, the implications are immense. A federal search warrant issued and executed at the home of the former president of the United States. FBI agents on a judge's authority, by definition on a judge's authority, searching Mar-a-Lago. John Berman here in for Anderson. The news broke shortly before airtime. We have assembled a team of correspondents and experts to tell you what is known, what it could mean, and where it may lead. CNN's Caitlin Collins starts us off. Caitlin, what are you learning about this FBI operation?
John, it's a remarkable development, with the former president himself confirming that the FBI has executed a search warrant on his home in Palm Beach, Florida today. He said in a statement that his beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, of course, which became his primary residence after he left the White House, is, quote, currently under siege, raided and occupied by a large number of FBI agents. He says, after working and cooperating with the relevant government agencies, this unannounced raid on my home was not necessary or appropriate. John, he adds, quote, they even broke into my safe, and he compared this to Watergate, reverse Watergate, and maintains it's an effort to stop him from running for president in 2024. Of course, we should note we have now learned that this search warrant had to do with that investigation into how the former president handled potentially classified information, certainly sensitive information, when he left the White House. That is something we knew had already happened, that he had taken about 15 boxes with him to Mar-a-Lago when he left the White House in January of 2021. They delayed returning those boxes back to the National Archives, which wanted them. And we knew this had been under investigation because there had actually been a subpoena issued to the National Archives itself for what was included in these documents. They wanted to know what was in them, who boxed them up, who personally took them to Mar-a-Lago. So those have been major questions surrounding this. But this is a dramatic escalation for these FBI agents to go and execute a search warrant at the former president's primary residence. I will note, John, that tonight the Justice Department is not commenting when CNN has reached out for this. The Biden White House was also unaware that this was being conducted and say they found out when the rest of us did, which is when the former president confirmed this. I also want to note Trump was not present at Mar-a-Lago when this happened. He is at Trump Tower in New York. He was not there in Bedminster, or excuse me, in Palm Beach, where he often does not spend his summers. Clearly, though, the former president is very unhappy about this and is saying he believes it was politically motivated, as we are waiting to learn more about what exactly was behind this.
All right, Caitlin Collins, stay with us for a second. As you noted, the former president not at Mar-a-Lago when this happened. He was in New York. And a quick reminder before bringing in our next guest, this comes just a couple weeks after Attorney General Merrick Garland made it clear to Lester Holt that no one is above the law, not even a former president, not even if he happens to be running for office. Joining us now, CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, also Norm Eisen. He's a CNN legal analyst and a former counsel to House Democrats in the first impeachment. Andy, I do want to start with you. Just the basics here. For the FBI to get a warrant and go search Mar-a-Lago, what needs to happen?
The world needs to move. I mean, I can't overemphasize to you, John, how big of a deal this would have been within the Department of Justice and the FBI. This is not, a couple of agents showing up at some judge's door in the middle of the night to get an emergency warrant. This is something that would have been planned out and reevaluated and legally examined from every possible angle by the entirety of the leadership structure of both organizations. So let's remember that to get a search warrant in any case, whether it's you or I or the former president, you have to go before a federal judge and convince that judge that there is probable cause to believe both that a federal crime has been committed and that evidence of that crime is is contained within the space you have described in your warrant request. So we have, in this situation, a federal judge who made that determination, giving the agents authority to enter that premises and search every part of the premises that might contain the items that are specifically described in the warrant. So if it's, for instance, documents, classified documents, things like that, and we don't know, but that's just a guess, then you could see why they would have the authority to search every space, every drawer, every safe, every closet, every desk that might contain those documents.
All right, Norm Eisen, the reporting from Caitlin here that this raid, this FBI operation, is in relation to the handling of presidential documents, including possibly classified documents. Why might that merit an FBI operation like this at the home of a former president?
Well, John, in America, nobody is above the law. And the federal laws are very clear that anybody who removes, mutilates, or destroys records, it's 18 U.S.C. 2071, is subject to penalties, including criminal penalties. There's even more strict rules for classified documents being removed from official premises because of the damage that can do to national security. When I was the White House ethics czar, this was one of the first things that we trained everybody in the White House and the administration on, starting with the president and the vice president, because the rules are the same for everyone. Very serious for a search warrant to be served on a former president. It doesn't get any more ominous than that.
So presumably, Andy, if I can go to you again here, the Secret Service at Mar-a-Lago, how would that work when the FBI shows up? Or would they be there given that the former president wasn't there at the time?
There's probably some contingent of Secret Service that are there to protect, to kind of maintain consistency in terms of their security presence at Mar-a-Lago, although it's not the full detail that would be present with the former president wherever he is, in New York or wherever that might be. In this case, we know that the White House had no former knowledge that this search was going to take place. It is likely that those agents reached out to their counterparts who provide security at that location at the absolute last minute possible. I'm sure everything they could possibly do to keep this quiet, to keep it confidential before it happened. I'm sure they went to every length they possibly could. So you can imagine some very tense phone calls being made to whether it's local police or Secret Service, whoever is protecting the property, in essence, immediately before agents showed up and executed that warrant.
And Caitlin, just remind us again, the issues and the questions surrounding these documents, 15 boxes of potentially what? And who wants them and why?
We were told really it's vague still what exactly was in these boxes. That obviously is a big question that investigators have, as well as how this was handled. We were told at the time it was documents, mementos, maybe some gifts as well included in this. And I should note that charges are rarely brought in a mishandling of classified information situation, but of course we just don't fully know the story here of what exactly is going to happen. This is a dramatic escalation. We do know that. And we also know from people who worked in the Trump White House and in the Trump West Wing that the former president did have a penchant for not handling documents in the way that they believed they were supposed to be handled. We just heard from Stephanie Grisham, who was former President Trump's press secretary for a time, who said that she witnessed it herself, him mishandling these documents, which they have a very certain way that they store them. They put them in a certain, you don't just throw them away in the trash. These documents when you work inside the White House. That pertains to any documents inside the White House because of this thing known as the Presidential Records Act, because it is a federal law about how you deal with these. And Stephanie Grisham said she witnessed Trump sometimes take them and throw them away, rip them up. Of course, Maggie Haberman from the New York Times has reported several times where there are documents clearly with the former president's handwriting that have been ripped up and then attempted to be flushed down a toilet. And Stephanie Grisham also added that she sometimes watched Trump put some of them in his pocket. And so those have been the big questions surrounding this. And I don't think to anyone who worked in the West Wing would be surprised by this, the way he handled it. I think a lot of people in the former president's orbit are shocked by the fact that this raid, as the former president is referring to it, a search warrant that was executed, has happened, because it does seem to be a dramatic escalation in this. I will note in Trump's statement, he basically is implying that because he had spoken to the government about this, or his attorneys, I should say, that he believes that this raid was conducted unfairly, that the search warrant was conducted unfairly, because he says after working and cooperating with the relevant government agencies, this unannounced raid on my home was not necessary or appropriate. We should note that they had about 15 boxes of documents, and we were told that they had delayed in actually sending them back to the National Archives until it became clear that action could be taken, and then those documents were sent back. So still a lot of details that we don't know, but this is quite remarkable, John.
So Norm, what Caitlin just said there, according to Trump, there had been discussions between his people and investigators about the archives. What step or what line would have been crossed in your mind? And again, there's so much we don't know, and people need to know that. We're going to be perfectly transparent about what we don't know here. But in your mind, what line would have needed to been crossed for the FBI, for perhaps Merrick Garland, if he was going to approve this, for this raid to have taken place?
Well, you always have to have the probable cause to believe that a crime or crimes were committed. You always have to have judicial approval. But when it comes to a former president, that hurdle is even higher, John. So I think there would need to be a showing of probable cause that not only were documents removed, but that it happened repeatedly. That not only were they removed, but they may have been mutilated or destroyed. We all saw those pictures of documents in the toilet. The issue of classified documents, there had been reporting that some of those 15 boxes included classified materials. When the materials were returned, was there information in there that jeopardized our national security? And then finally, it's important to remember, although this search warrant, according to what we know now, seems to be focused on these presidential documents that were removed, any evidence of crime that is found during a properly executed search warrant can be utilized by the government. So if there's evidence there of the allegations about obstruction of Congress, the conspiracy to defraud the United States, the false elector schemes, we know there have been raids on the lawyers, Jeffrey Clark, John Eastman. If there's any evidence of that was gathered by the government today, DOJ can use that as well.
Andy, I have to ask you, because you've been in the FBI during these politically charged and perilous moments. So when you saw this today, I mean, how did it strike you? I can't think of a precedent for this, where the FBI raids or searches the home of a former president. What struck you, Andy, when you saw this?
You know, John, it's both amazement along the lines of what you just described. Like, has this ever happened in the history of our republic, that a former president, that a federal judge apparently made a decision that there might be evidence of a crime in the residence of a former president? It's just astounding. But on the other hand, as with so many things with the former administration, it's also not that surprising. The former president currently finds himself in the crosshairs of so many varied and different criminal investigations that, honestly, the first thing that I thought of when I heard notice of the search warrant was, which investigation might this be a part of? There are so many options here. It's literally head spinning. But I think the one that we've zeroed in on and that people from the scene have allegedly reported makes the most sense. And to follow on Norm's comments from before, this is not the kind of thing that would happen in the event that the folks at the National Archives and the FBI just thought, well, maybe some classified documents by accident ended up in the president's personal boxes that went to Mar-a-Lago. The FBI would not have taken a step as drastic and serious as this unless they had good information to indicate that this was the result of some knowing willful, intentional acts of removing classified documents or sensitive documents, documents in violation of some federal law. So I think what we're going to see is a very serious allegation when it's ultimately uncovered.
Andrew McCabe, Norm Eisen, thank you both for your help and your experience here. Caitlin, we'll let you get back to reporting. Please, if you learn anything more, let us know right away, because these developments are coming in fast and furious. Next, more on the political repercussions, especially with the former president on the campaign trail for others and dropping more hints about another run in 2024.